you know that feeling you get when you go over a bump in the road, and you get that weightlessness, and then it settles when you go back, you know, and the car comes down again, and you carry on. Somewhere along the line in the last couple of years, the bottom fell out of my world. Like the floorboards broke underneath me and I started to fall, and I haven't hit the ground yet. The big pain for me is that I just don't know who to trust. For the longest time, I lived in the assumption that whether it was whatever political ideology had the keys to Downing Street, when it got right down to it, they had my best interests at heart. My memory of last year here, because I had kind of I dropped an old cast of heroes and acquired a new set, you know, people like Malone and McCullough and Brett Weinstein and Tess, and to walk into the room and they were all there. It was the first time I had ever been with them. And I was starstruck by the whole thing. And partly I think as a direct consequence of that, my memories of last year's conference are really vague.
Yeah.
It's almost as if I'm remembering being at a really drunken party or something, but my recollection of it is all just little fragments.
Yes.
I can't remember it. And then, you know, most unhelpful, I was thinking, right, I wonder, Del Bigtree was the MC, how did he do it? No idea. I remember this loud, proud presence in the room, but I don't remember what he did.
No.
And I don't remember a single thing that he said.
No.
And I look back on it, and then walking back in again yesterday to the event last night, there's so many people in the room who are so desperate still to express some emotion,
Yes.
feeling. And you walk in and it's like being in a confined space with almost too many atoms bouncing off one another.
Yeah.
And I came out at the end of it last night, microwaved, like fried. I don't know which way's up, because every person that's come up to speak to me has been, you know, they're coming in with such intensity. And yeah, so it's...
Well, it's a catharsis, I think. It's a release that
It is.
that most people can't have in their day-to-day life, because
I've always been. I mean, Trudy's here with me. My wife's here with me this time. She didn't come last year, but she's here this year. But we've always been absolutely together on it. And I've spoken to so many people over the last while who've not been able to talk to a partner or parents or whatever. Happily, even although, I mean, all of our family, Trudy and I were the only people, and our kids were the only people in our family who didn't take the products.
yes.
And but there was no rancour about that. But my in-laws and people were a bit bemused about why we weren't doing it. But there was no ill feeling, and there never has been any ill feeling. And Trudy and I have always been, if anything, Trudy's slightly further ahead than I am. Maybe we're on the same page, but she might actually, in truth, be a couple of pages further on. So we've always had that great togetherness.
Yes.
And I'm bemused by how people have been able to cope, because the number of people that come up to me and say, my wife thinks I'm a nut, or my husband, I can't talk to my husband about this. And I think, God, it's been almost impossible being able to be behind closed doors and just at each other, just on the same page.
I think it would feel very lonely and isolating, but I have seen firsthand, I mean, even within my own team, that people have gone through divorces and separations because of the conflict in values. In fact, it's been hard. My wife has also been on the same page, and it's actually been harder. She's had friends fall out of her, not necessarily because of her views, because of mine. Because obviously, she's not taking them public in the same way that I am.
Oh, I'm undoubtedly one of the neighbourhood loons where we live. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, it's almost at the point, I think, where people possibly cross the street rather than risk coming across.
Strange, because it's almost like they'd never dream of treating you that way prior to COVID, just because you have different views. Well, I don't know what you've been.
I was never an activist, protest engaged person, for which I am not proud. I realise now that I was not engaged in a way that perhaps I ought to have been. But I think something profound has happened, because so many of the people who have gone to all sorts of lengths in this context, walked away from jobs, relationships, cast out by friends and all of the rest of it, the sort of people who have felt no option but to take that path, clearly something profound has happened. I mean, they're not doing this about a difference of opinion over party political manifestos.
Yeah,
it's down at a right and wrong level.
It is.
There's been a fork in the road, and some people have gone one way and other people have felt no option but to go the other way, and it's been, extremely uncomfortable for those people. People have lost all sorts. And I'm bemused that people who have gone along with the orthodoxy, they look across at the other people who have gone the other way, and surely they see how painful it's been. And you'd have to think, they must feel very, very strongly because they've lost that, or they've lost this, or a combination of all of that. There's nothing in it. There's no material gain in any of this. There's no, everything is loss in terms of what you had before.
Indeed.
And you think, did you not look on at people who've put themselves through this kind of thing and thought, bloody hell, that must be coming from a fairly unavoidable place.
It's almost like a moral bifurcation. We have this kind of divide around values, but what's peculiar to me is when I come to a space like this and you feel the warmth and the love and the abundance and joy that's available. Okay, some of those emotions may have been suppressed by kind of the intensity of what we've experienced. And then you look at the tight, rigid control and the fear and the anguish and the pain within the kind of wider community. I'm thinking, which one would you rather choose here? That this one feels far more attractive. Someone who is pursuing truth. And
I think it's too big for a lot of people to contemplate.
Yeah.
And I do understand that. And I think in many ways, because I was initially energized by the jab, I thought, I'm not having that. I don't know what that is. I didn't know what it was. I just thought, I'm not having that. Maybe next year, maybe 5 years time, but I'm not having that just now. I'm certainly not putting it in my kids. And that was my gateway drug.
Right.
And then everything else started to, and I thought, oh God, I'm not sure about why we're in Ukraine. That smells peculiar as well. And climate. What? Hang on, wait a minute. Net zero. So it was a process of accretion. I think if I had held the line until now, when it's so big, when it's so demonstrably so large, to jump in now is even harder.
Oh, indeed.
I kind of tricked myself into it by just thinking, well, I'm not taking that.
Yes.
That's something wrong with that. And the lockdown, definitely wrong.
Well, it's fascinating to hear. It's kind of a gateway into this wider world, and that does become overburdening. It's complex. So I'll be interested to explore that with you in a moment. But it's when you realise the same people and processes are at the heart of those different narratives and those different stories. So that for me has then opened my eyes to the wider critique of foreign affairs, politics, governance, and all of a sudden it's this huge world. And the question everything tagline on my shirt has led me to do that.
Yeah.
That comes of great.
The big pain for me is that I just don't know who to trust. And I don't, I used to, I grew up for the longest time I lived in the assumption that whether it was whatever political ideology had the keys to Downing Street, when it got right down to it, they had my best interests at heart. They're going to empty the bins, keep the lights on, fix the roads, open the schools, provide GPs. I thought, whatever, Labour, Tory, SNP, whatever, they'll have that going for them. And then over the last 3 years, I've decided, no, they don't. That's not what's going on at all. It's not benign. It's not benevolent. It's operating on behalf of vested interests, most of whom I don't know. All this stakeholder capitalism and all of the rest of it. And I absolutely do not believe that the named people in power, Prime Minister, Chancellor of the Exchequer, whatever, actually make decisions. I think their decisions are being taken by markets, by banks, by the Bank for International Settlement, by the WHO, whatever. And there's some kind of, there's some kind of unified decision is made and they all roll it out in their own constituencies, Build Back Better, narrow window of opportunity, 15-minute ghettos. It's all coming at us everywhere at the same time.
Yeah.
You have not all spontaneously and from a good place come up with this as the solution.
Language.
That's not possible. There's some sort of centralised push coming here, but like I say, it's taken me 3 years to get there or 2 years or whatever, from a starting point of just thinking these jabs smell a bit hinky to me. I'm not going there.
The tricky part is that is then very disconcerting because that loss of trust, that the idea, the beliefs we may have once held about institutions and individuals it shakes the fabric of our daily existence when that trust is caught.
Well, you know that feeling. You know that feeling you get when you go over a bump in the road, and you get that weightlessness, and then it settles, and you go back. You know, and the car comes down again, and you carry on. Somewhere along the line in the last couple of years, the bottom fell out of my world. Like the floorboards broke underneath me, and I started to fall, metaphorically speaking, and I haven't hit the ground yet. Every time I think, oh well, surely that's it now. Surely we're back at ground zero, so to speak. No, it turns out there's even further to fall.
Yes. And
I don't know where we're going to end up. But it's the only time in my life I've ever, and it began with the lockdowns and whatever. It was a physiological response for me. It was physical. I thought, oh God, this actually feels wrong.
Yes.
And I didn't, not in a hypothetical, not in a metaphorical sense. I could feel it in my gut.
Yes.
I thought, what the hell? This actually feels wrong. It was like some relic lizard tail in some primitive part of my monkey brain or lizard brain just went for the first time in 50 odd years. And I thought, oh God. And I had to respond to it. It's like fight or flight. I've never felt that before. So I better listen to it, because it's real. It's a real physical manifestation of something. And I've felt like that ever since. It's almost like my stomach hasn't been right, in a sense, for a couple of years.
The tricky part is that I've experienced that deeply too, and we have a deep desire in a way for other people to have the awareness, that the awareness comes with that loss of trust and the anguish.
I haven't really tried to. All I've really done for the last couple of years is tried to empathise with people who are also feeling something similar.
Yes.
I haven't really felt in a position, nor do I feel as if I have the power to change people. Not really. I mean, I just say what I say because I know that, and I've been told that it chimes with people, and people get a great deal of comfort from, yeah, that's what I think. And that's all I've really been able to do. But, I think it has mattered to be able to do as much.
Yes.
But I don't proselytise and preach and try to tell people to live differently, think differently, do differently. People are still taking products. Well, good luck to you. I'm not going to get in your face and tell you to do something different. I don't feel the power to do that.
I also think it's the right approach, because no one likes to be sold to, no one likes to be persuaded. But that's effectively, as we've seen with the product marketing.
I mean, it's silly. I mean, it's silly in a way. I wouldn't want this quote to go out decontextualised, but I think it's almost like faith. You can't make someone believe. That's a personal thing that either happens to a person or they don't.
Yes.
They either one day or over a period of time come to the conclusion that they believe in something transcendental.
Yes.
You can't make someone do that.
No, but
you just have to be around them and whatever, love them for what they are, and then whatever. But I wouldn't say believe.
Right.
Believe in my faith.
Yes.
I don't get that. I don't.
The transcendental, don't even get them.
The T word.
The T word. At that level, that's to get a beacon of faith around something beyond oneself is I think is something that is similar but different. But when we talk about the world of marketing and advertising, beliefs are formed when we are exposed to something either repeatedly or with intensity or both. And advertisers know this, marketers know this. The word safe and effective has been used so many times, and it becomes a belief system subconsciously. And that can happen in every endeavor. So and when we act in accordance with those belief systems, it becomes almost an identity. And the human psychology, the human mind, and I maybe talk about this on Sunday rather than just dancing this time, is that we will do more to preserve our sense of identity than we will to challenge the potential reality we're facing. And we've seen that. It's become identity level.
I never, there's not a day goes by where I don't think, and Trudy and I talk about it all the time on the dog walk or whatever, and we go, what if it's us that's wrong? Yes. I haven't become, copper-bottomed 24-carat. I'm not sure. It's that line, the worst are filled with passionate intensity and the best lack all conviction. Question everything. I question everything, including myself, all the time.
Yes. So
so many people, are calling me a loon all the time. I think, well, maybe they're right. So I don't rule out the possibility that I've got it all wrong, but I would still I wouldn't go back to before. I would rather be a questioning, almost agnostic, I suppose,
Yes.
than be utterly persuaded. I'm in a hypersensitized state now,
Vigilant.
where I just feel a sort of threat, and maybe that's not a bad thing, because the world is not a safe place. And if you think that people you don't know are there to protect you, there's a naivety there that you don't really. It's a bit too much to ask of people you don't know that they care about you in that way. We've all got to take absolute responsibility for ourselves and each other 24 hours a day. You know, it's up to you to look both ways before you cross the road.
Yes.
You know, don't just wait for the green man.
Right.
You know, just because the green man says you're safe to cross, for God's sake, look left and right. You know, it's that kind of feeling. I will never put my trust in authority again, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
I think it's...
I'm just watching, thinking, well, why are you doing that?
Yes, I agree. But at the same time, trust is such an important component of being human, and
It's a high value currency, though. I don't think you should spend it just anywhere.
I agree with that. And this is where I would be really curious to hear your view on this, because in that environment where it's almost like the rug has been pulled, there's that sense that the floorboards, where is the floor, losing our footing, there's kind of fear on every corner, and not just around viruses, but also around the potential realities that could unfold. So we've got all of these vulnerabilities, which can lead to things like fundamentalism, nihilism, and the kind of dark triad. And a lot of what I've been examining recently is how do we protect our sanity, and how do we also question ourselves? That's absolutely important. How do we not rest on our laurels? Because critical thinking requires us to go back to our original assumptions and say, hang on, is that still true? But I'm more exploring, and I see it, I perceive that there's almost a fault line in the kind of movements that have emerged, and one that is divided on a line of fear. And we've seen how the governments have used worst-case scenarios to impose restrictions, improbable, unlikely worst-case scenarios. But I almost see that happening over here as well. Now we're looking at what could happen and living almost in accordance with the worst-case projection. Mm-hmm. So I look at this and think, how do we actually find our own footing? How do we, in the same way you talked about the green light and looking both ways, how do we look down and say, actually, well, there is the ground. I find my ground. I find my... How do you take on that?
I suppose it's been such a disruption, you know, a great disturbance in the force. I think it was inevitable that it would take time to go through it. You know, you're not just going to have it the one day and be all better the next. I think there's a process of evolution or realization or whatever. You know, 5 stages of grief or whatever. I think you've got to go through a process, and I do think it will come to an end. I think we've been drugged by convenience, without a doubt.
Yes.
And it's reached its, you know, at the nth degree in the gadget that we all carry in our pockets.
Yes.
You know, everyone's just expecting everything everywhere all the time, as it were. And we've been gulled into thinking, well, I don't need to take responsibility for myself at all. I can just get it.
Yes.
I can be made well. I can be protected against the next illness. Someone else will make that so. Food will come. And we have scandalously divorced ourselves from the responsibility that we have for ourselves.
Yes.
You know, we're dislocated from food to the point where, you know, I don't know the extent to which it's true that we're all going to be expected to eat insect burgers. I don't know, but I know they're out there. I know they're out there, and I know the fake meat is out there.
Indeed.
But I think that's partly been possible to bring that in because for most people in the West are so divorced from food.
Yes.
You know, they don't grow it. They don't see the animals raised. You know, they don't appreciate the practicalities of slaughter and all of the rest of it. They just, you know, the thing that keeps you alive is just presented in a cellophane wrap in supermarket shelf, and you're not invited to feel involved in that process at all.
I think many people...
And now the farmers, so now they're able to say, I mean, you see people being interviewed and young people saying, yeah, we should just ban farming altogether for the sake of the planet. And you think, I can't even go there. I can't get... How do you start?
Yes.
that people are, so people are divorced from, well, we probably don't need farming anyway because, the supermarkets provide all the food or Deliveroo provides food. What's the problem? It's the same people that think, well, why are you worried about your currency? Because your plastic card will get you anyway. We have been gulled and lulled and doped into a version of reality that just, we've abdicated our responsibilities for everything. And I'm as guilty of that as the next person. And the solutions that lie ahead, better way, the way ahead, Royal Council for Health, it is all about, don't expect somebody else to make you feel better when you're ill. Don't get ill.
Take responsibility.
Take some responsibility for, there are eventualities that are lying out there for all of us, like bear traps that, that you'd stumble into inadvertently. But we could all be doing a hell of a lot more to make sure that we were in a better place when those bear traps snap shut on us. And likewise, everything else, just expecting the council to cut the verges and pick up the litter. And why are you waiting for? Why are we all of us all the time waiting for other people to do all the stuff of life, so that we can just sit there?
Fascinating how many common threads have come up from my conversations this morning. Independently, people from all over the world saying similar things. Now, the final thing I want to close with, when we spoke this time last year,
this time 3 years ago,
I remember you saying to me that that we were talking about the better way and thinking ahead and what that means, and are we ready to now start looking forward into solutions? And I think this year's conference has got a different balance. There's more of that now, asking the question, what kind of world do we want? But when we spoke last year, we spoke about, do we still need to create accountability for what's gone before us before we can move forward? How do you feel about that now?
Oh, well, yes, I do definitely feel that, that kind of push that there has been to put all that behind us. That was a difficult time, and we should just all move on. I think that's unsatisfactory. I think so much was done that it's not good enough just to say it was a very difficult period and we're all doing our best. There has to be an accountability for what has happened, and long before you would start, long before forgiveness comes contrition and admitting to yourself and to everyone else about what actually happened. You have to confess before you get absolution.
Yes.
But the absolution's being requested before. No, but let's take a beat here and just look at what actually happened.
Indeed.
Let's evaluate that cold-bloodedly if necessary. But we can't just pretend that the last 3 years didn't happen, and that that Bobby Ewing's just woken up in the shower and that it's Dallas as usual. It's not. That's not possible. So there has to be that process. But I think there's so much fear, and people feeling so powerless in the face of that fear, feeling helpless. And I think to some extent, and again, it's a bit like faith. You can't do it for people. People have to, by their own process, come to it. We are all of us very powerful, sovereign individuals. If we just open our eyes to that, and it's embedded. People ought, I think. I mean, I look at things from a historical perspective. There's no getting away from the fact that thousands of years ago, our ancestors understood the sovereignty, the notion of the sovereign human being. Now, obviously, that's been abused and whatever down through the millennia. Of course, it has. But it doesn't take away from the fact that our ancestors thousands of years ago came to important conclusions. And things were embedded, they were crystallised in, say, a document like Magna Carta. But I mean, nothing in Magna Carta was new in 1215. It was a restatement of what everybody knew.
Indeed.
Like the king, in 13th century England, the king was the government. But it was a restatement of what had been known since God knows when, since ancient Greece. Know that we are the power. You're the sovereign. You're like first among equals. You're like the number one public servant. But you abide by what we all know to be the case. You can't lock me up and throw away the key unless and until a jury of my peers has looked at the situation and decided, not you, the people who live my life and understand my circumstances come to a conclusion about whether or not I've done something wrong. That's because if you entertain a situation where a government writes laws, enforces laws, and decides on the punishment for breaches of those laws, that's the textbook definition of tyranny.
Indeed.
people have to realise that, no, you can come up with legislation, but we the people, among ourselves, will decide what's right and what's wrong.
Yes, we'll ratify it. Yes.
And if we decide it's wrong, it is wrong. That final say is ours. Get back in your box. You take your stupid legislation and take it away, because we the people know that's not right. Because we are, as sovereign individuals, we all understand the difference between right and wrong, and essentially we should govern ourselves.
Challenge you, Neil. This is where I get really into a mess in the bind with it all. I did think about this a lot, you see. By the same token, something like 450,000, maybe more, people signed to say put us in lockdown in March. So we would look at that and say, absolutely not, that's wrong. But if you were to put it to the public vote under those conditions, the public vote would have said, we're going to have a lockdown. So how do you then,
That's a good point.
in under those conditions, if you say we the people are going to decide, we're still subjected to the same mechanisms that can sway what we deem to be right and wrong, because we're so separate from that guttural feeling.
We're a long way down a road. You know, we've been prepared for this for a long time. People have just accepted that the limit of their authority over everything that happens around them is a general election. Whenever it comes along, that's it. That's that you get one say in these things. And people have been divorced from taking responsibility for themselves and each other. There's no quick fix. You're right, I dare say. You know, the public opinion at the time would have been, lock it down. You might even have got public opinion voting in favour of mandatory vaccination and hold these people down and jab it. But that's symptomatic of decline.
Yes.
That's how far we've fallen from what ought to be any kind of meaningful manifestation of democracy. We've become a subservient herd mentality, easily led, and getting out of that is going to take as long as it took to get into it. There's no quick way out of it. I think that's what's so depressing and feels quite desolate, because you think, well, we are where we are. Public opinion did say whatever,
Yes.
lockdowns were right and all of the rest of it, but it doesn't mean they were right.
That's right.
It was still wrong. I mean, the concept of jury is predicated upon the idea that it's not a majority. If jury, as it was envisaged in the distant past, was that if 12 people or 15 people in Scotland sit in judgment, if one person says innocent, then they are. That is the judgment of the jury.
Yes.
Which is extraordinary. You imagine someone's been tried for murder, and 11 people say, yeah, definitely, bang to rights. If one person says, no, set them free, that's the judgment of the jury. Because the other problem with people's misapprehension about democracy is that the majority is right. Now, there's a lot of difficult, challenging concepts about this, but enshrined within trial by jury is the idea that one voice is always preeminent. Whatever that one voice is,
Yes.
that's the judgment. It's mystical almost.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful, challenging concept.
What is?
And it means in order for it to work properly, people need to be educated about reality and power and agency and sovereignty. You can't expect this ideal of society as that we've arrived at the moment.
Indeed.
But that's not to say that there aren't profound and fundamental truths. And that idea enshrined in trial by jury is that always the one person. It's not the majority. That's an abomination. The majority vote. It's not. And it carries with it. Implicit in that is that sometimes the majority is wrong.
Indeed. Well, we've seen that. It reminds me of one of my recent podcast guests. He said, if you send 100 people out into the woods and their task is to take a photo of a squirrel, and 99 of them come back with no photos of any squirrels, but one does, was there a squirrel in the wood? If you did it on the masses, 99 people said there's no squirrels in this wood, but that one person got a photo.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same concept. of course, you have to verify that person. But
It's very difficult. It goes to the heart of what it is to be human and alive. The idea that the majority is always right. Phone if the audience vote on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and so on, and the assumption was that the majority will be right.
Yes.
Well, they might be.
Yes, not always. Well, listen, heaviness is what we've talked about. Could you close on do you have a message of hope, or is there something that's driving you forward now keeping you inspired to continue with it?
I think difficulty, sadness, all of these things, grief, get a bad rap. Pain. No one wants any of those things. But you can't be to be lured into a feeling that you're entitled to be, and in any realistic way you can be just happy and living a cushy, comfortable life for the whole of your life. I don't think that is what we should be aspiring necessarily towards. And I wouldn't change a thing. We've all been through our own experience of this, lost that, whatever, had this travail and this problem. But I wouldn't go back, because I would rather be in the situation of things really messing with my head, and the anguish of it, and the difficulty, emotional. I haven't been sent in a coal mine or anything. I've not been put into the galleys or anything. It's not been, I'm not saying love me. I've got a sad life, but I've been challenged in ways that I hadn't previously, and I would rather have that. And I think, so what if the future is difficult and challenging? If worst case scenario, we're only here once, for as long as you get, it might as well be a real adventure.
Yes, I agree.
With some blows to the face,
Absolutely,
and some hunger and some striving. A little bit of happy is like chili powder in a meal. You don't want too much of it.
Yes.
So that every now and again, when you taste happiness, you think,
There it is.
there it is.
Yes.
And I've been put. My life is more challenging than it was before. And I think, well, so what?
Yes. Agreed. And pain.
I don't want to lie to Lilo for the rest of my life. What's the good of that?
At time would be nice in between.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
But the pain makes us strong, but also it's a signal to us that something's not right. In our body, if you've got some physical pain, it's time to take action. And when we get sick, it's a time to think about, am I living a healthy life?
But challenge gets a bad rap.
Indeed.
Look at these things that people do even for entertainment. Where they put, there's something subliminal about why people get put into things like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. I mean, people want to see, if they won't do it themselves, they like the idea of people having all of the modernity stripped away, and let's see what happens when they're on that. Look at all the formats that look to do that to people. Leave them on a desert island or shut them up in a house or whatever, and strip away a lot of stuff and see how they get on. And subliminal within that is that I think people know that, the striving, struggle, difficult, it gets a bad rap. C.S. Lewis wrote at length about, it was he envisioned God as a sculptor, and that with every blow of the hammer and chisel, which hurt us, but it was shaping us into something that is ultimately what we're supposed to be. And that is, you shouldn't shy away from being, living through vexatious times.
I've often said that people don't want the responsibility that comes with the freedom on the basis of...
Well, for an awful lot of people, freedom means freedom from responsibility.
Yes.
What they want to be free from is making decisions about their lives. Just tell me what to do. Tell me what uniform to wear. Tell me where to go, what to do, when I can go to the toilet. Because it's easy. But if you say, no, go and sort that out for yourself.
Yeah, well, here's to the challenge, Neil. Thank you so much. Is anyone talk to you? I would love to speak more about the history, but we have to wrap up here. So lovely to talk with you.
Good man.
Here's to the challenge.
Yeah.
Road ahead.
Good.
Thank you, Neil.